All right, so this is the Drupal usability meeting for May 7th, 2019. And we have a few suggested topics from the channel. I will start with the one that NG was planning to present earlier last week. And then since there was almost nobody going to show up, we didn't do the discussion there. So the backstory here, as while I'm sharing my window, is that in the Drupal 7 to 8 transition, there was a lot of projects who moved to third-party hosting. A lot of projects had third-party ported versions. So they were on GitHub and they were other areas where they moved to. And there are other maintainers who did updates of modules because the original maintainer was not necessarily supporting that update yet, etc. So what happened then is we set up this wholly independent project called the Drupal 8 Contrib Porting Tracker that had a Kanban board of where each module is, and it had issues for modules. So if you look at the issues, there's like 2,000 issues. And you would have an issue for table field module, let's say, and they will tell you what's going on with the module, where it is, and who's doing the port, and what kind of help is still needed, what's the roadmap for the Drupal 9 port, etc. And then people would discuss how is it going. And then the thing that automatically happened based on these issues for table field, for example, is that Drupal.org would display this blue box on the project page that says this module has a pre-release version of Drupal 8. To find out more, follow this issue or download below. And this issue leads back to the Contrib Tracker one. So if you click there, you go back to the Contrib Tracker. So basically, this was integrated in a UI on Drupal.org project pages to inform people of module status for Drupal 8. And some people get angry at this because they did not approve of the port happening elsewhere, and they didn't want this hardwired message to appear on their page, etc. And the issues were not always easy to follow, what to do, etc. So it was not necessarily user-friendly. And with the Drupal 8 to 9 transition, it's much easier to do. There's much less to change in the module. And what we want to do on Drupal.org is to put this in the hands of the project maintainers, but still have this as some kind of structured data. So the idea for the eventual UI to display this was designed after the same blue box, but it's been suggested since then that we should use this project information iconography area thing. So basically what we suggest is that there would be a default message that says Drupal 9 is planned to be released June 3, 2020. And there's this branch of the module that's supported, and it has 4 known problems with Drupal 9, and you can get involved in making this project Drupal 9 compatible. And this would be a general link to documentation on how to get involved with projects. And if the module maintainer desires to actually specify what they want, then they can specify that. And that would be shown something like this. They would say the same thing at the start, and then there would be a note from the maintainer that says whatever the maintainer entered. That this issue currently found are not actionable due to core support. Once the core version, whatever, goes unsupported, then it could be fixed, etc., etc. So this message could be used by maintainers to say that I want more help. Let's please work on this meta issue, or please send me money because I need funding, or this is going to be ported next year as part of Project Blah, or this module is abandoned and please use this other module instead. This is not going to be worked on anymore for Drupal 8 and 9 and future. So basically, you can explain the whole thing here. And we want to use this to help contributors direct themselves and engage with the maintainer the right way. So if they say they're not going to port the module until 2020 January, whatever, then people can easily understand that and can move on. If the module maintainer says they need money, then clients and sites using the module may actually figure out that they can contribute to that pool. If they say that this is abandoned, then what to use instead, then that's also useful information, etc. So basically, the intent here is to put control back to the module maintainer's hands. And the way we want to resolve this is basically add a new field on Drupal.org that says something like field next major version info. We name it general so we can use it for Drupal 10 and Drupal 11, whatever, maybe. And the label would be Drupal 9 porting info. And then we would say that this field allows you to specify the Drupal 9 porting status of your project. For example, linking to an issue where it's being coordinated. And we would have this default value that you've seen in the screenshot, basically. So feedback would be welcome in terms of how we plan to display this. The feedback from the DA was that we should display as less as possible on the project page. So they said that we should avoid displaying the number of problems and just say if we found problems or not. And instead link to a page that actually lists the problems and displays the message instead of displaying all the things in line. And some other people said that displaying the message in line would be useful because people don't necessarily click away to understand the whole thing, and displaying it in line, if it's short enough, helps get the kind of engagement from contributors that we are looking at. So I guess that's the whole thing. Any feedback?
I like that you have the notes notes from the maintainer just there, which is kind of, like you said, not having to click away. I'm assuming there's going to be, with that link, like you said, 4 known problems, or if it just said there was known problems, that would take you to, do we know where that would take you, or do we not know exactly yet?
They would probably take you to a tab on the project or something where they will list all the known problems, and would probably display the same message again, and then somehow help you engage in helping fix the problems.
Oh, so it would be like the readiness check.
Yeah, it's a result of the readiness checks, the like Drupal check and upgrade status, that kind of thing.
Yeah, okay.
So we would display the list from that, basically, and help people get ready for Drupal 9.
What kind of problems can be shown here? So
that's going to be very developer-y. So that's whatever is deprecated, that kind of thing. Let's see if I can find the nice screenshots. This post has a nice screenshot. So the default output of Drupal check is like this, but we would display this in an HTML page, obviously. So like your node PHP is calling the deprecated method entity manager on the Drupal class, or the entity form entity manager deprecated property, etc. So basically the actual information of the problems is not friendly to users, definitely not friendly to end users.
Okay.
So this would be more interesting to whoever wants to actually contribute solving the problem, or assess the complexity of the problems if they know enough about the developer level stuff. So we definitely don't want to show that here. I think the not showing the number was also in part a suggestion to avoid calling too much attention to that, because the 4 known problems, there may be 4 very small problems.
Yeah.
Maybe 1 huge problem and 3 very small problems.
And
we can't really quantify that.
yeah. So the thing is that so I totally understand the reason of not saying the amount of problems, and it actually makes a lot of sense. And actually, maybe instead of calling it problems, we could call it something else. Not the best person here to actually suggest something in English, but I don't know, maybe something like tasks to do, or I don't know. Because for me, problems, that's why I was saying what kind of problems. And for me, it would say, oh, maybe it has security problems, or I don't know, something really strong.
Yes, I think the DA suggestion was to say this, as the code is right now, it's known to be not compatible with Drupal 9, or
exactly
looks like it's going to be compatible with Drupal 9 as far as the information available right now.
What about keeping it shorter to something like compatibility blockers? There's and I have an unpopular opinion.
Something like
suspect. I much prefer to see
because
how many issues there are.
At the end, for what you're showing, it's a matter of compatibility. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not, of course, it's a problem, but
the thing about having a number is it tells us,
and then you can actually link to the report.
Yeah.
Or something like that. I don't know how to call that.
Yeah.
Or see more information here, or something like that. So you still have the link, and it's not a problem. It's just
it's a compatibility blocker or compatibility for something. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the idea of not using known problems and saying, being more explicit about it. It's not necessarily a problem. It's just that this is a compatibility issue. Like maybe it could just say that it could literally just say compatibility issue, or
Yeah, we definitely don't want to devalue or devalue the module because it has any compatibility tasks. I think compatibility tasks is maybe a good word, because it's the things to do.
Yeah, that's a
problem with the Drupal 8 version of the module, because it works. So it's things to do for making it Drupal 9 compatible. Yeah, it's hard to exactly pin down the words, because we need to be careful of not saying it's Drupal 9 compatible if we found nothing, because it may mean that our process of finding is inaccurate, or it may mean that not all of the compatibility tests are defined yet. Not everything is deprecated that will be deprecated. And so a bunch of those things may increase the compatibility tests for the module in the future. So we can only say that as of now, we have not found any compatibility tests that are to be done. Or we found some.
Task sounds like something positive.
Yeah.
Could we shorten the beginning and rather than saying
compatibility? I think it's the best, because it's exactly that. So yeah, makes sense. And about the note from the maintainer, I think it's useful. I'm not sure how bad it could actually be. I think you were saying that maybe it wasn't useful, something like that. Gabriel, I don't recall exactly what you said, but
yeah, these are, so the DA said that it could make the page very busy.
Yeah, that's right.
These are the kind of examples that we've had for, like, leave me alone, I don't have bandwidth for this, we'll start thinking about it later in 2020, or for Drupal 9, there is a better project at X, see that, or I need funding to work on this. Here's my funding mechanism, hire me, donate to this open collective or Patreon or whatever. or I prefer working in a mega patch or split patches or whatever, or also see this existing issue, or get involved in the Z initiative to help port this project, or so there could be a bunch of things that where people can point contributors to the right way to engage with them.
So
And that's hopefully going to help.
in this section,
Yeah, I think it's a really good suggestion.
Am I the only one who can hear Thomas?
No, you can. I can hear. Yeah.
I can't.
Thomas, go ahead.
oh, okay.
That's fine.
I'm sorry.
Can you actually, Gabor, can you hear him?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Oh, I'm the only one. What?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Today's UX meeting brought to you by endless technical problems.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Google having this big announcement today, and so they're not paying attention to the.
Okay. I'm going to restart the computer because it's going to be the only thing that is going to solve that. I'm coming back in 1 minute or so. See you now.
Thomas, it's all yours.
Okay, I hate mentioning this without Christina on the call. The question I have about the second part is the suggestion for to make it free text with suggested text, or where the note from the maintainer, or is it to make a controlled number of options available so that we can keep the text really tight and make certain it has a mechanism where it generates the appropriate meta information, like it requires a link to how you would hire them, or it requires a link to where they can get involved in the project, so that way we keep the page minimally busy, basically giving multiple options that are all roughly the same amount of content.
Mm-hmm.
I think the idea is to give free text with the default value, and that way the project maintainer has control over the project page.
Yeah, we are not sure that we know the finite number of different things that would possibly be applicable. And then building multi-field solutions for this, like enter a link and do this or that, or there may be multiple things that they may say, like I prefer funding, and also I have this meta issue that I'm working with, and by the way, this is part of the config CMI 2.0 initiative, and you can get involved in the meetings.
I guess, though, that in this section of the page, adding a huge blob of text seems overwhelming, and you lose the opportunity to gather data, meaning you can't actually tell how maintainers are managing this problem in the code space. Whereas if you make it controlled options, because like there shouldn't be a lot of elaboration in this field. That elaboration should be in an issue in the issue queue. This should be, because there's already lots of free text spaces. And so just my perspective on it is keeping it tight is a lot more enticing to people. So you want to entice people to contribute.
Yeah.
And if there's a whole bunch of stuff there, it's just going to be more text on the page they don't read.
I like that idea about one thing you said just there about if we have a predefined set of options, at least we can do some kind of analysis on that to identify what kind of blockers, generally speaking, are out there. Potentially, maybe that's something that I don't know if that is something we want to do at all, but it does give us that flexibility.
Yeah.
I don't know how many would actually provide a freeform text if we get the default right. So I'm not sure. There is like 8,000 Drupal 8 projects. So if there would be 100 or 200 who provide some custom text, and that may be the case, then I don't think that would stop us from being analyzed. We can put that in a spreadsheet and read it in an hour or something at most. So I don't think that I don't think that I'm not sure. I'm a big data nerd. I'm pushing for having all this analysis on Drupal.org about all the projects that we had data about their compatibility, and then have historic data available so we can plot how it improves or gets worse based on other factors, etc. So I'm all for that. I'm all for having parsable data, but I'm not sure this is the place for that. And that's also this is also an opportunity to give maintain if we are to display the number here. I think it's important to give maintainers enough tools to augment the information and like rectify their reputation if they feel like displaying the number of compatibility tasks is still damaging the reputation of the project or something. You know.
I guess ultimately, I'm one of the people who wouldn't read a note from the maintainer because it would be, I have a problem with inconsistency with things that are written. And when I'm looking at, I read the blue space here as being an error or a warning of some sort. Like this is a highlighted area. And if it got too long, then it's not going to be of interest to me. And I think really important to me to know is how many people are looking for funding and how we can expose these modules so that people can see a quick list of these 50 top modules are looking for financing so that you can get them done and migrated. And having free text, while yes, you can look in a spreadsheet, you can't automate it. And you can't try and ensure a timely resolution for critical modules.
Yeah, that's true. As somebody told me from the DA that they are looking at, well, Neil Graham told me from the DA, in fact, that they are looking to integrate maybe an open collective field or maybe some other, some field on projects for funding purposes. And there used to be a git tip field, but then git tip died. So then they are hoping that this new thing will hopefully not die.
Is it a Patreon style model, or and are they suggesting the page becoming more Patreon-like in terms of allowing for project support in various ways?
Yeah, I don't know what I don't remember the exact service. And also I'm not sure which queue I should look. But there is supposedly some process to edit.
And I don't want to waste any more of our time on this. It just, to me, the number one blocker in the past has always been trying to get modules ready for the next version. And the shorter the amount of time we can ensure the top 100 or top 500 modules get moved, I think the faster we're going to see a boom in people either building straight out in D9 or migrating to D9. And it would be really nice if we can see that uptake match what we're predicting with the fact that D8 to D9 upgrades should be simple. But this is just a potential blocker for the rate of uptake.
Yeah, so one thing that we can do here for that is to limit the length of this field, for example, to something that's manageable, and then if people need to go and be very concrete. I don't think there's going to be that many people customizing this field that will have a hard time analyzing that. The data so last week I published a slideshow about Drupal 9, state of Drupal 9 that anybody can present themselves. And I put in the same data that Dries presented in the Dries note from Dwayne. He analyzed the 800 contributed modules. And the data from there was this. So 48% in March was already compatible with Drupal 9 at that point in time. And then 35% of the 700 plus modules had 1 to 5 Drupal 9 compatibility tasks that are to do using your new terminology, and then 17% had 6 or more. And there's some outliers there, like the scheduler modular, with I think has like 300 problems, but most of them are a few. So ideally this will improve, and in some cases it will get worse by introducing new deprecations. But ideally this will even improve further. So I'm not sure that this isn't necessarily hugely blocked by specific types of engagement. We want to have the maintainers direct the process of engagement with them, though, because even though it may be 3 issues, the actual resolution of the 3 issues may be complicated enough. And some people have been pushing back on that for how the contributors been with them. One thing that when they did this report at MidCamp, I think Benji was also there, and they opened issues with top 300 modules on Drupal.org, and then a lot of activities started off from that. So it's probably a lot better if you run the same status on the same Drupal core version, then it's probably a lot better now.
That's all reasonable. So limiting the number of the length of the free text is a reasonable solution to try and keep things legible. Can we include a list of the types of things they might want to say so that they could cut and paste it and at least have some commonalities?
Yeah, that's what I realized. This description needs to be much longer and actually include some examples. Yeah. Not every maintainer is most maintainers are not professional in marketing their improving their contributor involvement. So probably suggestions would help a lot.
Yeah, I think it would be good to provide some suggestions as to what people could enter, and also I was also thinking the same thing, that we probably would benefit from doing going all Twitter on this and limiting the number of characters you can enter. But I wonder, one challenge that might be worth investigating if you do that is with the way that Drupal character limits, if we then also allow people to put markup in, which the only markup I imagine would be links, would the HTML markup count towards the character count? Because then that would severely impact your character count if you had a couple of links in there, for example.
Yeah, I think we could still find the right number, though. I'm not that afraid. And then when you can include a link, and then that can include a number of other words. Right, so from then on, it's like read more, whatever.
Yeah, I think most people looking at that slide, it's quite good to see that we have a lot of modules have very few issues. So for the people I imagine who are going to use that field, it's going to be something that we need months of work on this. And for that, at that point, it's going to be like, okay, here is this big meta issue. Go and read this if you want to help.
Mm-hmm.
Or again, for funding, if here's a big meta issue. Also, if you want this done quicker, send me some money.
Yeah, that's the plan.
I'm not so worried about limiting the amount of text that can go in there, because there's the whole rest of the page. If the maintainer of the module wants to say a lot, they can say it somewhere else on the page. I think we should try to keep this short. This is in an area of the page with a lot of other generated text.
Yeah.
Yeah, so so you're saying you would be for a character limit on that field?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And for the record, I am on the fence about displaying a number of issues, because on one hand, it's quite good if you're like, oh, like that one, there's only 4, and they happen to be just the fact that the module is calling deprecated functions and it can be fixed in 5 minutes. Like, for example, if all 4 of those were calls to entity manager instead of entity type manager, that's generally speaking a fairly like a 5-minute fix. So in some respects, it's good for like quick wins, like, oh, 5 issues, 4 issues, let's smack these out now. On the other hand, those could be 4, massive issues. So I'm somewhat on the fence about what we do there.
On the other hand, keep in mind that we have to think about usability for several different roles. I mean, first there's the module maintainer, of course. Then there's the potential contributor. And then there's the evaluator, someone who wants to know, is this the module I should be putting on my site for now, or should I be looking for another one?
Right. Yeah.
And having the number is helpful to that last person. I think that's the point of view that Thomas is representing.
Could that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose then again it comes back to the scale of, are those 4 issues just small fixes, or are those big challenges? And unless you're a developer, you might not know that, and then yeah.
But as a contributor, if you see that there's 1 or 2 or 3 things blocking, so not the module maintainer, but if you're a contributor or even a site builder, and you see there's just a few things, it means that you can go back to your team and say, okay, can someone help out and dig into this? Whereas when it's unknown, I tend to treat things as, okay, it's like when something's not in security, when doesn't have the security shield yet, I'm just like, don't use it. And my concern is if there's too little data in that field, my site builder instinct is to then discount the entire module for Drupal 9 and say, I can't upgrade.
Right.
I'm not as prone to pushing, even if I can't solve the problem, I'm not going to be able to go back and say, well, I want you guys to click through things and figure out what's going on. I could go back and say, it says there's 3 issues. If we help address one of those, we're going to get closer. If there's just 1 issue, come on, guys, let's get on it and see what we can do.
Right, and that's actually that's a good point, and also makes me think of that. Well, you've got these. Sorry, I've just lost my train of thought. I don't know what I think. I'll come back if I remember what I think.
Yeah, I don't know. We can quantify the complexity, and I think that's not.
It's not about quantifying the complexity. It's about quantifying how many separate things that have to be looked at. Because you're going to have 1 person who looks at a thing generally at a time. And if it's a large number, then I know that I'm not going to try and get a small team to contribute. I know that if it's 1 to 3, there's a high probability that no matter how difficult the problem is, I can at least have someone look at it. And my comfort level with unknown variables such as this is just a problem, I would treat it as this isn't covered by the security advisory policy. I don't look at the module at all. I just skip it.
Yeah, the biggest offender that we found so far when testing this was Scheduler, by the way. And they have a lot of probably low-hanging fruit of tests not converted. So they have a lot of tests, and there a certain text of class parser test base is deprecated, etc.
Yeah, I remember what I was going to say, in that if we look at this, practically or rationally, that the Drupal 9 release for I don't want to say in every case, but for the vast majority of cases, it is okay. We're removing all this deprecated code. Like, we should have upgrade paths for all of that. So there should be documented ways to fix everything. So in that case, and again, I don't want to generalize, but I would suspect that if a module does have a number of issues, that for the vast majority of cases, those are going to be small fixes, because it'll be like, this is deprecated. Here's a link to the change record or documentation, why it's deprecated. Here's what you do instead, basically.
Yeah, so the Matt Clayman, who's built the Drupal check tool that we are using here, is working with the maintainers of PHP Stan to actually get us the deprecation message that Drupal has in the source code instead of this generated thing. And the actual deprecation message has data on what to use instead and when it was deprecated and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I think I'd be happy with that then. Yeah.
Yeah, we will eventually have that information, but we've not yet. We so far we can only count them up and roughly see what's going on. I mean, to a trained eye, you can see that this is a lot of like assert deprecations and tests, and most of them are. So it's probably easy to go through this 200 issues and fix them, and it's not too scary. But yeah. I think there's only a few outliers like this, and then once they are off, then it's going to be a couple. Yeah. Right, I think that's good feedback, and I don't want to take up the whole meeting, so we can move on to another issue that I think Benji prepared.
Okay, shall I? The issue I'm looking at is 2713327. And I guess the issue is that the Migrate API creates a couple of tables for every migration, and there's no way to get rid of those tables.
Sorry, are you sharing your screen, or are you playing?
Not yet. I just pasted the link into the chat. Let me share my screen. So there are reasons for keeping those tables around. So it's not something that we want to, these aren't tables that we want to delete automatically. But there are also cases in which people want to get rid of these tables. If they're on shared hosting, they might have a limit on the number of database tables they're allowed. And I think that the usability question is really just asking us to review the wording of the screen where you choose to delete them. So I think if I open this image in a new tab, it's a pretty standard confirmation dialog. Remove migration tables. With this form, you can remove migration mapping and message tables. This is a process that is not reversible, and if you delete the table, it cannot be restored. The tables can be useful after migrations have run for troubleshooting. Remove them only with caution. I don't love that text, but it's a good starting point, I think. And then there's a place where you can check off either all tables at once or the ones you want to remove. And you click the button at the bottom, remove migration tables.
So I had a quick question here. It doesn't really explain the motivation for why you're allowing the removal of individual tables. I mean, I can guess at why we might want to do that, but I would suggest that the text should suggest why we've done that. Otherwise, I would make it all or nothing. But making it partial, I'm assuming you lose the capability to troubleshoot, while simultaneously you're still stuck with some tables for no discernible reason.
Yeah, I think that one reason for allowing people to pick and choose, if you look at this list, there are some migrations that are probably run only once, like import photos of professors is probably something you do when you're migrating the site. And then once it's completed, you don't need to run that migration again. On the other hand, JSON feed of movies is a migration that's probably going to keep running as long as the site has its current design. And it would be a serious problem to remove that one.
Yep, that is exactly the explanation I'm looking for, because as a site builder, I wouldn't know that there could be necessarily two different sets of tables here. I mean, I guess it's very obvious after you've explained it, but just looking at the list, it wouldn't have. I would have just assumed that it all came through from a single migration. But again, I haven't done the migration, so and I don't have anything that would have a JSON feed of movies in it, for instance.
Why? Just because I actually haven't really I've done one migration in my Drupal life. Strangely enough, from PHPVB to Drupal, so it's not comparable to Drupal. But I'm just curious why. My understanding of a migration process is that you migrate the data, and then assuming it all went well, that's it. You don't need to then, by definition, migrate again because you already kind of have everything. So, is there a reason, for example, you would still want those extra tables? Or you mentioned you might keep a migration running for, I guess, indefinitely.
Yeah, so some of these, like the JSON feed of movies, that looks to me like something that we would have used the feeds module for in Drupal 6 or Drupal 7. And the migrate API is often used for doing that sort of thing in Drupal 8. So that would be one example of migration that you would want to keep running forever. And even if it's a once and done migration, in the discussion on the issue, they talk about, well, you never 100% verify that the migration is complete and correct, and there might be problems years later. And if you throw away the tables, it's very hard to diagnose those problems. But another use case is that you might want to have some redirects automatically generated on the site. And as long as you keep those tables around, you can say, well, the thing that used to be node 1, 2, 3 is now node 4, 5, 6. So I can create that, that redirect automatically. So I think there are actually a lot of reasons why it's good to keep the tables around.
Yeah, you can also like migrate most of the site and then keep your live site running while you are trying the migration on the site. And then you can do incremental migrations of any changes from the live site to your migrated site. And when you are happy, you can turn over the site to the new one. So you don't need to run the migration every time again from scratch. That's a feature that's even supported by Drupal core. The Drupal core Drupal migrate UI.
I definitely understand all of these use cases, but my concern still is just looking at this page, it is not discernible as a site builder which ones you'd want to keep. I think it's a much more robust problem space. There's no indication that 4 of these 6 migration tables were related to the same migration, for instance. So we could assume the JSON feeds, both of those were created separately, but the other 4 were part of the same migration. So there's no grouping. There's no ability to discern importance. And the text itself doesn't really make it clear that there's that kind of value that you could find in it. And I can understand not necessarily wanting to have it strongly documented immediately on this page, but it would be really helpful if this page linked to documentation that gave much better, robust examples of why you do all, some, or none.
Yeah, I think those are all. Thank you for those explanations, because those are, I can definitely see the value in why you might want to continually run some migrations. And what might help here, because again, building in the last point, there isn't any indication of how much potential data you're going to remove on this screen. There's not like an indication of, okay, how many, because I'm assuming these all have some kind of correlation to database tables. So, how many rows are going to be removed, or how much space may you gain from this, because that could be valuable information there. Because you might, if you run a migration, run some migrations and say it's like you're migrating taxonomy terms and you have like one vocabulary with like 6 terms, like you probably don't need to run that migration again, so you can safely disregard that. But you might want to keep a large volume, or the other way around, for example.
I guess the other question I have is, could we provide a suggested MySQL dump command that would include or generate a MySQL dump command that someone could at least optionally, if their environment supports it, use to make a backup of these files or these tables before they're deleted?
Yeah, that would be a good idea, because you might want to have that in case you you realize 2 days later, I shouldn't have deleted that migration table.
Okay, so let's see, we're getting near the end of our schedule. So I have 4 suggestions that I think I'll add. And I guess I want to agree on whether these are strong recommendations or just nice to haves. So one is to provide a link to a documentation page with more information. And I think that's a requirement. Do people agree with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Second is more information on how much data is in the tables. Is that a requirement or a nice to have?
Nice to have, in my opinion. A really good nice to have, but if it blocks getting this type of functionality out there, then I'd rather have the capacity to remove the migration tables. But it would be highly important to like have the issue in the queue for the future.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay. And then some way of grouping the migrations, which I think, migrations, maybe it's not core migrations. Maybe it's just the Migrate Plus module that provides migration groups. Anyway, I'm not sure that's something that can be done in a really helpful way. So I'm going to say that should only be a nice to have.
Agreed. It's, again, I think it's less important than the size of tables and data that is definitely going to be available. It would make it a lot easier to make a decision as to what to keep or throw. But ultimately, it is on the site builder and developers to know what the meaning of their tables are. So I think that clearly would be a nice to have and not a must.
And the fourth is to either provide a way to directly download a dump of the tables, or if not that, then give instructions for making a backup. Is that a requirement or a nice to have?
I feel that's more of a requirement because no matter how much information we put in the text, I anticipate that someone somewhere is going to cry. And if we can,
Yeah,
if we can make it so that one less person in the world cries tomorrow, that's a good thing.
that should be the new tagline of Drupal. Making one less person cry tomorrow. I'd agree there. I think on that note, do we recommend that we provide a command or an actual button to just download it? Because to me, a button, click this button to download it, data seems slightly more usable, but a command might be a bit more, I don't know, it seems a bit more developer friendly.
I think a button runs the risk of like security questions. Like I mean, in my experience, we tend to avoid like any of the automatic modules that download tables and parts of the site. And I wouldn't necessarily assume that someone who would prefer to use a button would understand what's in these tables on a table by table basis. Whereas giving them a command allows them to dump it to a secure place, and it assumes that they have access to the database directly.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, well, I'm fine with just the command then. Yeah.
So by command, you mean a SQL query, or?
SQL dump is what I'm thinking, but I would go with whatever the contributors who are or core maintainers who are working on this. I'd very willingly support whatever they thought was best. It's just more the functionality of having a recoverable path. It can require extra work on the part of the site builder / developer, but just having a path forward where essentially, so for instance, let's say I clicked a button and I wanted to delete everything but those 2 JSONs. It would generate the SQL dump query and list the names of the databases before removing them. And you'd have an accompanying button on the screen that said like generate backup command or something like that. So you press the button and it builds the command for you. And then, and again, all of this stuff, I would offload instructions on these things to a documentation page that clearly documented this entire page. I don't think we need to have a whole lot in the UX. It's just making it available, like the explanations of why you want to delete stuff. But putting it here makes it too busy. You really want this page for lots of tables potentially.
So you select the migration tables, you click remove migration tables, and then what you're suggesting is another page that essentially is a preview of what's about to happen, and gives you the recover commands to like SQL commands or MySQL dump command to download the data. Yeah.
Essentially something along those lines, trying to follow the existing patterns, but making the information available and saying, we recommend this, it's not required. Do you still want to delete? Yes. Or have you already done this? Yes. But keep it very, very simple, minimal development time.
And I'd just like to note that just to preemptively make sure there's a consideration that obviously MySQL is not the only backend you could use, so it might be worth just keeping that in mind as well, because there are obviously SQLite and Postgres and probably others. I don't know all the different backends you can use now, but
that is true.
It would be good to provide support for all the known ones that we support in core.
I guess the supported backends are MySQL and Postgres and SQL. What's it called? SQLite.
Yeah. Or it's SQLite. I think they.
Right.
I don't know what they did with that L. But yeah.
It does double duty.
Yeah.
So I actually need to go, and I'm running the meeting, unfortunately. So I think we wrap.
Okay.
That's some good suggestions.
Yeah. That's probably a good natural stopping point, I think, and for us.
Great. So I will post feedback on the 9-field issue later today, or maybe tomorrow. Depends on time. And I think Benji will post this feedback on the migration issue.
Right.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.